Rockers in Recovery Media is dedicated to carrying the message of addiction recovery through music, news, events, and festivals taking place within and not limited to the clean and sober community.
Hey, welcome to Radical Recovery Radio Live. Radical Recovery is hosted by Jack Kelly. Jack, take it away.
Thanks, John, and happy Monday to everybody. People have asked me why I use the word radical, because to some people it can have a negative connotation. But if you look up the word radical in the dictionary, here's how it's defined. Getting to the root or origin of something, thoroughgoing, as regards a change from accepted or traditional forms. So what this show is really about is getting away from accepted or traditional forms that don't work within our industry, within the treatment industry, and that's where many of us go to get help. But for many of us, we don't get the help that we need. And it's a big problem. So I've come to look at it this way. What do the Titanic and the opioid crisis have in common? The crew of the Titanic saw the iceberg. What they didn't see was the danger lurking below the iceberg. And for us, the opioid crisis is like the iceberg. We all see it. Some of us have had firsthand experience with it, or we have relatives who have had firsthand experience with it. And the fact is that addiction costs our society, get this, $444 billion a year. First time that I read that, I didn't believe it. But when they started explaining it, sending people to prison, the accidents, the time that we spend in hospitals, the time that we spend in treatment, it has ramifications that affect just about every part of our society. So what is it that we don't see lurking below this iceberg for those of us who are either have an addiction or are concerned about this opioid epidemic that we have in our country? There are three dangers that hold below this iceberg. One, according to the HBO documentary Rehab, treatment centers have a 93% failure rate. And they have attempted to solve the problem by hiring therapists with master's degrees in social work or mental health counseling. Obviously, with that kind of failure rate, they need to find a better solution for holistic, evidence-based forms of therapy that offer us alcoholics and drug addicts something that we truly need when we come into treatment, and that's hope. The second problem that we find below this iceberg is that over the last 10 years, many owners of treatment centers and sober homes mastered the art of swindling insurance companies out of billions of dollars by ordering unnecessary and expensive lab tests, and the treatment that they offered was a joke. The third part, and this is the saddest part, what's lurking below that iceberg. On any given day, 30% of us who are in treatment have no interest whatsoever in living a recovery lifestyle. I've seen this many times, and to many of us, treatment is a 30-day vacation that we take 3 times a year. So that adds up to $90,000. You multiply that by 1,000, and now we're up to $90 million. And that cost gets passed on to American consumers in the form of higher health insurance premiums. So if you think about it, this makes a lot of sense. We have a huge failure rate. We have massive amounts of insurance fraud within the industry, and we're our own worst enemy in that we drain insurance companies out of, it adds up to billions of dollars a year. When somebody gets diagnosed with cancer, they go to treatment and they want to get better, but our brains have become so battered by the chemicals in alcohol or drugs that we don't give our brains the time to heal, so we go back and we recoup them, we go back out and we do the same thing all over again. So it is not an easy problem to solve. Now, I have some good news. The good news is that Senator Elizabeth Warren and Representative Elijah Cummings recently proposed legislation that would appropriate $100 billion over 10 years to treating addiction, and with good reason. According to the Center for Disease Control, every day, 475 Americans die from drug overdoses or untreated alcoholism. Now, I want you to think about this after what you just learned. If you were given responsibility, allocating this $10 million for people who really need treatment, where would you send them? Knowing that we have an industry that can't produce more than a 10% recovery rate, knowing that massive amounts of frauds exist within the treatment industry, and knowing that at least 30% of the people who show up for treatment are really not interested in getting any treatment. They're interested in just taking a 30-day vacation and having an insurance company pay for it. So one of the things that we can do in trying to solve this problem is take to heart the lessons learned by insurance companies who pay treatment centers literally billions of dollars to help us recover from our addiction to pills, alcohol, or illegal drugs. So where did that money go? It didn't go into research. In many cases, it went into the pockets of the treatment center owners. Taking a look back at a little bit of history, over the last 10 years, more than 1 million of us enrolled in one of many South Florida's drug treatment programs, which were heavily advertised and promoted on the internet, if you remember. Unfortunately, many of us unknowingly became victims of an insurance scam which had us moving through a set of revolving doors: treatment, followed by stay at a sober home, followed by relapse, followed by more treatment. And it wasn't unusual to see this happen, as I mentioned, 3 and sometimes 4 times in the same year. And many owners of treatment centers laughed all the way to the bank. The light that many of our desperate parents and spouses saw at the end of a dark tunnel turned out to be a train filled with greedy predators who profited from us as a result of their unethical and illegal business practices. Now think about this. Whether you needed treatment for diabetes, heart disease, or addiction, one of the assumptions you would probably make is this: these people want to help me. However, many of the people who got involved in the billion-dollar treatment industry were not there to help us. They were there to help themselves become millionaires, and many of them did. So as word of easy money spread among those preying on the recovery community, treatment centers and sober homes began to spring up all across the country. And within a short period of time, I'd say that more than 15,000 of them had set up shop. And according to the federal government, they generated, how about this, $35 billion a year in annual profits. Let's think about this. The medical students take in the process of becoming a doctor is the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. So, if we want to solve this opioid crisis, as well as all the other crises that we have to deal with in addiction, if owners and directors of pharmaceutical companies, pain clinics, treatment centers, and sober homes took this oath, that would contribute a great deal to solving the opioid epidemic that is facing our country. So the reality that we have to face as Americans is that America is not losing the war on drugs. Our children are losing this war. So to reduce the number of casualties, the Surgeon General, Dr. Jerome Adams, is urging us to carry the opioid antidote naloxone. Now, this drug, which is sold under the brand name Narcan, can very quickly restore normal breathing to anyone suspected of overdosing on opioids, and that would include heroin as well as prescription drugs. But after years of bludgeoning our brain with the chemicals in drugs, some of us who are active in our addiction now shoot up in groups and have Narcan readily available. So if someone overdoses, we bring them back to life. If they get again, go back to playing Russian roulette with their drug of choice. In a press conference that he gave recently, Dr. Adams stated, knowing how to use naloxone and keeping it within reach can save a life. And that raises this question: what kind of life do we have as active alcoholics and drug addicts? From my own personal experience, I can tell you that addiction comes with a package of very brutal emotions: hopelessness, resentments, anger, fear, depression, self-pity, guilt, shame, and as you know, overwhelming feelings of loneliness, isolation, and despair. Narcan does not provide any relief for any of these emotions. It's like taking us out of hell, sprinkling us with water, and then sending us back to hell. So, why do so many of us keep choosing to go back to hell? And I think there are two reasons. First, addiction is a brain disease. So I would have to say brain damage. The chemicals in alcohol and drugs literally kill millions of brain cells. Therefore, we are not, shall we say, playing with a full deck. People who are playing with a full deck aren't possessed by a force that causes them to steal from their parents and relatives or sell their possessions or body to buy drugs. Next part is withdrawal. Addiction is called the disease of chemical dependency. Our body becomes so dependent on the chemicals in drugs that we can't function without them. We're all aware of the great tragedy that occurred at the high school in Parkland, Florida. 17 people were killed. That sparked nationwide demonstrations where thousands of high school students and concerned citizens demanded change in our gun laws. Across the nation, students left their classrooms for 17 minutes to honor the memory of those killed and to support changes in the gun laws. In contrast to the students and teachers killed in Parkland, Florida, 64,000 of us died from drug overdoses in 2017. That is more than the 58,000 Americans who lost their lives during the Vietnam War. But I haven't seen crowds of people marching on Washington demanding that our Senate and Congress commit themselves to finding a solution for a plague that is decimating a whole generation of young Americans. Why not? Perhaps it's because so many people don't see us having a future. Just a past that keeps repeating itself over and over and over again. So perhaps it's time for treatment centers to start coloring outside the lines by getting their staff trained in holistic evidence-based forms of therapy that offer every alcoholic and drug addict something we desperately need, a hope that we can rise like the phoenix from the ashes of addiction, that we'll be given access to tools and resources that enable us to become more resilient. I'm almost done with this second book that I'm working on, Resilient Recovery, How to Conquer Your Addiction. And the reality is that we only have two options as addicts and alcoholics. We conquer our addiction or it conquers us. So what does the word resilient mean? It means that we learn how to prepare for, overcome, and adapt when faced with stress, adversity, or challenges, instead of reaching out for a pill, drink, or a drug. And that is really, if you think about it, what recovery is about. And that is what treatment centers should be teaching us how to do, how to prepare for, overcome, and adapt when faced with stress, adversity, and challenges, so we don't keep doing the same old thing and having the past repeat itself over and over again. So let's take a look at relapse for a minute. I believe that there are only 4 reasons that I can relapse. Number 1, I can forget that I'm an alcoholic and addict. And one of the ways that we do that is we stop going to meetings. And it's important to go to meetings not because we're weak, but because we're human. We forget that we're alcoholics and addicts. We stop going to meetings, or at a Christmas party or at a wedding, somebody hands us a drink, the next thing it's inside our bodies, and the worst thing that can happen to us at that moment is nothing. That we don't want a second drink, because that convinces us that we no longer have a problem. And the next thing, we have 2 drinks, and the next thing, we're trying to make it to the liquor store before it closes at night. So it's important to go to meetings. If you think of it another way, let's assume that we were stationed in Afghanistan. And I tell you that I'm going to hop on a motorcycle, head into town, get a carton of cigarettes. And you say, Jack, if you head into town on that motorcycle, you will not come back. You'll probably find 3 snipers along the way who are just waiting for someone like you to come down that road. So let's get a convoy together. We're all going together. So again, it's not that we're weak. We're human. We forget. So it's a way to offset that liability of forgetting. Staying involved, go to treatment, not just for ourselves, but to support the other people who are there to support us. The second reason that I can have a relapse is I think I can control it. If I'm going to meetings and I hear people coming back telling the horror stories that happened after they went back out, it will remind me that once I put alcohol or drugs inside my body, I can't control what happens next because the cravings take over. And if I also have the idea that while I'm there, I can help some of those people who relapsed or some newcomers share some of the wisdom that I learned through the program. So I can get 2 benefits from it. 1, it reminds me that I can't control it. Number 2, that I need to give back. And here's the third reason. I can know that I'm an alcoholic. I can know that I'm an addict and still make the decision to pick up a drink or a drug. And that's because, you know what that is? It's the efforts. I'm bored. I'm angry. I'm lonely. I'm depressed. I'm feeling sorry for myself. And I want to change the way I feel. And we all know how to do that. And the way that we offset that is by meditating. The original members of AA meditated every day. Find that out. You have to connect the dots in the big book. And if you would like to get a copy of that, the numerous references to the fact that they meditated every day, if you would send me an email, send it to jack@the Lazarus, LAZARUS house.net. I'll be happy to send that to you. And last but not least, the reason I can relapse is physical pain, where I have an auto accident, I have some surgery, etc. I'm in a great deal of pain, and I may not have an option if I want to get through that pain, but to take some prescription drugs. And there are ways that can even be handled. There are some other options. My son has a yoga studio in Chicago, and he has people that come to him that had become addicted to prescription drugs as a result of having an accident or having some surgery. And they go to their doctor, and they tell the doctor they want to get off the drugs, and the doctor really says, there's nothing I can do except continue to give you a prescription to help manage the pain. And I can't tell you some of the incredible changes that take place in the lives of the people that he works with. And in many cases, they learn how to eliminate that pain by getting in touch with the power of their own bodies. Excuse me. Or it becomes much more manageable for them. But I think in general, if you take a look at the underlying cause of almost all relapses, they can be traced to one source: stress. What kind of stress? The stress that comes from mental, emotional, physical, or spiritual pain. Now, as active alcoholics and addicts, we only have one automatic conditioned response to pain. We use alcohol or drugs to escape from them. Wouldn't you agree with that? Bill Wilson defined addiction as a cancer of the emotions and the soul. What did he mean by that? Well, here's one clue. Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. Assuming Bill was right, shouldn't treatment centers be using therapeutic tools that teach us how to effectively manage our resentments as well as other destructive emotions? Bill's definition also suggests that we use alcohol or drugs to fill some kind of a spiritual void. And it's important to understand that we will not fill that void or win the war on drugs until the demand decreases, which raises the question, why is there such a high demand? Personally, before coming into recovery, I felt I had this hole inside me. And alcohol and drugs filled that hole. And the reason that they felt so good was that I was coming from a place that felt so bad. No self-esteem, no self-worth, and lots of self-hatred and self-pity. And of course, people who don't feel good about themselves always seek ways to feel better. And alcohol and drugs provide us with a quick fix that allows us to experience those feelings for a short period of time. And as long as feeling good is the driving force in our lives, we will continue to use alcohol and drugs to get that feeling. So how do we overcome that obstacle? Well, here's one of the lessons the original members of AA learned in the School of Hard Knocks. They said the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. As alcoholics and drug addicts, we get stuck in a mind that has a house of mirrors, and it gives us a very twisted perception of reality. We can't see the good in the world or in people. Everyone and everything is pulled, pushed, and twisted into distorted shapes. But this problem has a solution, and our recovery literature refers to this solution as a spiritual awakening, which has absolutely nothing to do with religion. Here, the focus is not on feeling good, but on being good, making a contribution, being of service to others, living a meaningful and purposeful life. Now, this doesn't mean that we become like Moses at the Red Sea, where waves part and we no longer experience problems in life. What it does mean is that we have access to tools and resources that enable us to deal with whatever problem we have in life without having to pick up a drink or a drug. It asks us, when we have this spiritual awakening, to do what our mind is begging us not to do, and that's to be with other people instead of isolating. Other people who have found a way out of that house of mirrors. People who are evidence of the fact that miracles take place in their lives, and we need to listen to their advice and follow their directions. So our recovery doesn't happen by luck. It's about hard work, a relentless drive for constant progress. I believe that it requires a mentality of someone who becomes a Navy SEAL where failure is not an option. Some of us are sicker than others, so unfortunately on every given day, we got 30 to 40, 50% of us in treatment who are not there to get treatment. Some addicts that I've spoken to believe that the federal government could solve the opioid crisis by legalizing drugs and having a drug czar make those drugs available to us at no cost. They have so much brain damage that they can't envision a life without drugs or believe that a well-designed treatment program gives us access to tools and resources that enable us to actually heal our brain. During the past few years, quite by accident, I discovered 3 companies that offer holistic, evidence-based forms of therapy, and until very recently, none of them were marketing their programs to the treatment industry. Now, this is beginning to change slowly, and they've gone the extra mile by developing aftercare programs that we can use in the comfort of our own homes after we leave treatment. And why is that important? Because that is when relapses occur. Prior to getting involved in the demand for their services came from the military, first responders such as paramedics, police departments, hospital staff members, as well as employees of multinational corporations. Now, these are people who need to quickly recover from stressful situations so that their emotions don't cloud their judgment. According to the Center for Disease Control, 450 people a day die from drug overdoses or untreated alcoholism. Why? Well, here's Bill Wilson's thoughts on that matter. By discovering what our emotional deformities are, we can move toward their correction. Without a willing and persistent effort to do this, there can be little sobriety or contentment for us. So this would suggest that the mission of treatment centers is to, 1, help us identify our emotional deformities, such as self-hatred, unreasonable fears, self-pity, and resentments, and then to give us access to holistic, evidence-based forms of therapy that enable us to transform our fears to courage, our anger to peace, our resentments to forgiveness, and our doubts to trust. That would enable treatment centers to become part of the solution instead of part of the problem. I'm going to leave you with a quote. One of my favorite quotes, called The Warrior's Prayer. Grant that I may become beautiful within, and whatever outward things I have may be in harmony with the spirit inside me. May I understand that it is only the wise who are truly rich. And I may have time for one more quote here, if I can find it. You can hang in there for a second. If you can walk on water, you are no better than a straw. If you can fly in the air, you are no better than a fly. However, if you can conquer your addiction, well, then you can really be somebody. Good night, and God bless.
Rockers in Recovery Radio is based on opinion only and is not meant to treat or diagnose any health or mental health issue of any kind. If you feel you need help for any health-related issues, please contact a physician or mental health professional. The opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of Rockers in Recovery.
We can stop HIV, Iowa. Unfortunately, there are barriers that make our job a little more difficult.
Stigma is one of our biggest challenges.
So we should talk about HIV more.
And support people living with HIV.
Visit stopHIViowa.org.
Okay, round two. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, oh, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.